Beyond the gates, spoilers tease that suspicion, once planted, will not rest until it has eaten through the good parts and left only bone. Donnell McBride found himself sleepless in the kind of way that made the day feel like an accusation, every creak of the floorboard a question he could not answer, every sunlit wall a reminder of the man who had been, and might not entirely have been, his father. The watch had been the first crooked thing. It wasn't valuable by any Hollywood standard, an old, dented gold watch Doug favored because it had belonged to his father, but to Donnell it was a small, private relic of ordinary days, a laugh shared over coffee, a hand on his shoulder, a reckless joke about the fishing trip they never took. He had recognized it before the man wearing it did. He had seen it flash under the blue neon of Joey Armstrong's casino bar, glittering like a lie under dim lights. He had gone inside like a man who could not help himself, heart hammering in his throat. The air smelled of spilled beer and cologne, the music a low throb that seemed to try and hide words. He pushed his way through clusters of men who cheered too loudly, lit cigarettes in corners no one should, and then stopped at the bar where a broad-shouldered man laughed with a cigarette between two fingers, Doug's watch glittering on that wrist. Donnell didn't wait to measure his anger. He grabbed the man's arm. "Give me that," he demanded. His voice was a blade. The patron turned. Conversation fell into a brusque silence like a window closing in a storm. The man looked at him, surprised, then angry, then suddenly nervous. He said, "This is not yours," Donnell said. He pushed the strap, fingers cold, and the man tried to shrug off the contact. Joey appeared then, as if conjured. He moved through the crowd with the surety of someone born to own every room he entered. He put a hand on Donnell's shoulder, not unkindly. "Take it easy, kid," he said. "You don't want this scene." "My father's watch," Donnell said. The words left his mouth like a prayer and a curse all at once. Joey didn't flinch. He smiled that broad, policy-honed smile, and then, smooth as oil, he said, "Listen, I appreciate your concern, but that man is one of my bartenders. He wears it. Maybe it's a similar model, maybe he borrowed it in a pinch. We're partners with your mother, Donnell, you know that. We ran papers, we did deals. No reason to get worked up. Let's talk outside." Donnell's pulse beat faster. He should have been reassured by the explanation. A misunderstanding, a similar watch, a man who had borrowed it, but the details did not line up. He had been at the house a dozen times in the past year. He had seen the watches stacked in Doug's dresser like a lineup of regrets. None of them were missing. Doug was careful about his things, careful in the way men become careful when they are told to keep their faults out of the wind. "You're partners with my mother," Donnell said. He knew how that phrased out in small-town billing, a handshake in daylight with a riser, a slip of a ledger in the back room. "When did that happen?" Joey's gaze skipped, measured. "We've worked on some ventures together, you know, hospitality, some property deals. We help each other." Donnell thought of the nights his father came home smelling of cigarette smoke and stale rice, of the fights that seemed to start from nowhere and ended with Doug drinking alone in the dark. He remembered the time Doug had stumbled in late, eyes red, and muttered something about men who had offered him help and then patterns that couldn't be trusted. "He called you a rat once," Donnell said. The memory was a hard pebble he had been carrying for months, and now it rolled free. Joey's jaw tightened a fraction. "Your father had demons," he said. "We tried to help. We did business, sure, but we were never enemies." "Then why did he go to your place the night before?" Donnell stopped himself. The accusation in his mouth was raw enough to cut. He pictured Doug at the casino the night before the accident, the clumsiness, the way he picked up other people's anger like a second skin. "Why did he go there?" Joey's smile grew thinner. "Maybe he came to drown something. Maybe he accidentally left one of his things with an employee." "You can't assume." The bartender, the one wearing the watch, stepped forward, eyes wide and ashamed. "Sir, I found the watch in the back locker," he stammered. "Must have been left in a bag. I borrowed it for a bit. I didn't think." Donnell's hands tore like a child. He could feel the taste of blood in his mouth though he had not struck anyone. Joey moved closer and spoke softly into his ear, a calculated hand at the small of Donnell's back. "It's not worth this," he murmured. "Talk to your mother." When the bartender accepted Joey's cue, taking the brunt of Donnell's fury with a bowed head, Donnell noticed the ease with which Joey had rewired the room's moral electricity. Blame transferred. Faces shifted. The bartender took the role of subject and scapegoat. Joey had done it with the practiced hand of a man who'd never had to fight fair and who had spent too long in rooms where truth bent itself to convenience. Donnell left the casino with a taste of copper in his mouth. The watch's outline burned like a brand on the inside of his palm. For 3 nights he paced his apartment like a caged animal, thoughts snapping between pieces of evidence and the gnawing certainty that something had been kept from him. He started, simply, old receipts, account ledgers tucked into the hollow of a closet, a bank statement with a line for cash withdrawals on nights when Doug swore he had been home. He dug through what he could at his old man's things and found patterns that did not make a son any happier to confirm. Doug had debts. They were not generous debts. Desultory loans to friends or a mortgage payment late here and there. They were the kind of debts that made men crawl out at night to places where everything promised the short-lived forgetting of a gambler's prayer. There were numbers with Joey's name scribbled near them, shorthand notes about cover, rolling reserve, names Donnell recognized from fractional postings in the paper. He confronted Vanessa at home, not in the public way that would invite gossip, but in the kitchen where she kept family photographs like talismans against memory. The late afternoon light made her hair look almost like a halo, which infuriated him with the unfairness of it. "You said he wasn't in debt," Donnell said. He had rehearsed this confrontation into a blade, polished with sleeplessness. "You told me, we'll be okay, Donnell. We don't owe people like that." Vanessa's hands stilled on the dish towel. For a heartbeat, she looked like a woman who had been steering a trailer in heavy fog and suddenly realized the bearings were wrong. "We did our best," she said. "Your father made mistakes." "Like sleeping with other people's partners?" Donnell's voice rose hard against the familiar appliances and sink fixtures, a sound that made the water drip like a metronome of accusation. "The bartender told us what happened. People at Joey's place have been talking. They said it was you." Vanessa recoiled as if someone had slapped her. "They said that? They said you were with him. They said Doug knew. He drank because he knew he was desperate and he drank because he had nothing left, Donnell." Vanessa cut in. "Doug kept telling me." She broke off, breath trembling. "Doug kept telling me to accept help. He kept telling me not to bury things. But what could I do? He drank when he thought he could fix it himself. He lied to me, to you, and he tried to keep us afloat by making deals that—" "You make deals with Joey?" Donnell asked, incredulous. "Why? You were supposed to protect us. You told me that. You told me you kept his worst in the basement." Vanessa's eyes filled, but she was quick with her defenses. "When you're on the edge and your husband is disappearing dollar by dollar into other men's hands, you take what help is offered." Joey gave him a line of credit. He said he could manage Doug's appearances, the charity nights, the appearances for clients, but Doug couldn't stop himself. She said the word manage like a prayer that would keep the guilty in place. The ledger Vanessa kept in the kitchen drawer, the same drawer where she kept old receipts and a matchbox from a motel once used during a fight, was like a small altar of secrets. Donnell had opened it before, once as a kid searching for courage, and found nothing but ordinary household accounts. Now he dug again when she was asleep and found stamped papers, transfers, marked with nights, with names that matched anonymous deposits into Doug's account, with cross lines that suggested a path of money he had not expected. He learned, piece by excruciating piece, that Doug had owed Joey. He also learned, like a shard of glass in a soft bomb, that Vanessa had money coming in from sources she refused to explain. The deposits weren't large enough to make headlines, but they were frequent and consistent, as if someone was paying for a silence that needed maintenance. When Donnell asked her about those deposits, Vanessa changed the subject as if she could steer conversation away from the deep water. Rumors collected like lint in the town's underbelly. Donnell ran his own reconnaissance, drifting to places where gossip found its feed: the diner on Main, the laundromat where paychecks were spoken of in hushed tones, and finally to the casino where a waitress, her apron smeared with sugar and cocktails, leaned in and offered him the kind of truth that bites. "They're an item," she said, eyes darting like a bird afraid someone would frighten it. "Been seen leaving together, Sneaking into the back office. Vanessa's been close with Joey for a while, everyone says. Doug. He drank more after he saw them. Told people she was with him when he needed help most. This was local information, though it felt global in the way it rewired Donnell's memory. He thought of the nights Doug had been drunk enough to confide in strangers, the way his hands shook when he reached for the bottle. He thought of the barred list of people who had once offered to help and then taken. Always taken. Joey sensed the widening cracks and began to play them like strings on a violin. He had always been better at the long game than the short fuse. When Donnell began to ask questions in public, when he went to the funeral with something like grief and something like a hunt, Joey met him with practiced gentleness. "Kiddo," he said in a low tone one evening, offering a condolence flavored by a hand on the shoulder. "Doug had demons. We all know that. I gave him a hand when he needed it. Look at me, we're all just human, trying to keep our heads above water. Why you trying to drag my name through the dirt?" Donnell wanted to strike him. Instead he asked the question loud enough that the bar's murmur turned to a hush. "Were you there before he drove?" "The security logs say someone left the building at midnight." Joey's jaw tightened, but he laughed it off. "We all leave at midnight. Kid, you want to pin your grief on whoever's wearing a better suit? Let's be better than that." But the smile would not hold for long. Joey was not just smooth and cruel, he was also dangerous in the way of men who have made a career of knowing what a person would do to protect a reputation, and then extorting the outcome. He knew about Vanessa's ledger. He had to. For the transactions to make sense, someone had to be recording them. He had power because he had information, and he used that power the way a spider waits for vibration in the web. He would not hesitate, Joey thought, to discard a pawn if it protected a larger design, and pitting son against mother was a low, effective blow that would weaken both, leaving them more manageable. Donnell, for his part, found himself the recipient of carefully curated half-truths. Joey's allies whispered things in his ear, framing Vanessa's silence as loyalty, painting Doug in darker strokes as a reckless man who had driven himself to ruin. Joey even bought the bartender a new watch in public, a sick joke that became a badge of his dominion. "You don't have to do this alone," Joey told Donnell once, voice syrup smooth. "Let me help. I had business with your father. Let me take care of what's left." Donnell thought of the way Joey handled money, of the ease with which he bought silence and loyalty, and he knew he could accept those offers and become something other than the son who wanted to honor his father. It felt like sitting at a table where the chips were stacked, and every time he accepted Joey's help he would be forced to bet a little more of his integrity. At home, Vanessa walked a tightrope that was losing its balance. She had kept the ledger because she believed she could control the story, could manage the fallout, could keep the family image intact just long enough for grief to harden and soften into something manageable. Each deposit was a bandage placed over a wound that would not close. Each lie was a stitch that might hold if never stitched open. But the universe has a way of picking at the thread any barred or resentful hand throws in its direction. Public eyes crept toward her like flies to honey. Rumors became headlines in the local feeds. People who had once sent casseroles now leaned on porches to whisper and judge. Vanessa watched her son pivot away from her with the agony of someone learning a language of betrayal, syllable by syllable. When the funeral came, the town gathered like a storm front, the church full and the press standing at the end of the walkways with cameras angled. In the middle of the gray, Jacob, his jaw set, expression grim in a way that made the church feel colder, entered wearing the quiet authority of someone with a badge and a file and a right to be feared. He approached Vanessa after the ceremony, his presence like an icicle into the warm flesh of whatever story she had been telling herself. "We reopened the case," he said plainly. His voice had no flourish, just that clinical certainty that can annihilate lies. Vanessa's face folded. "Reopened? Why?" Jacob held her gaze. "We found evidence at the scene that suggests foul play. The preliminary read on the car shows that the brake lines were tampered with." He watched Donnell stumble forward, a man at the center of a thunderclap. The church pressed in with the hush of a day that had become too public to be private. Vanessa's breath hitched, and in that single inhalation was the confession of 1,000 nights of looking at the ceiling and pretending that the past could be rearranged. Donnell felt his knees buckle as the ground under his story shifted. He had wanted the truth, But not this, not the shape of it when it implicated the intangible strings woven by the men who orbit convenience and power. Joey stood across the grass, his silhouette small against the photographer's. He watched the scene as if watching a chessboard where someone else was finally making a daring move. Donnell looked at him and, for the first time, didn't know whether he wanted Joey to explain, to confess, to deny. He only knew he wanted the ledger from his mother and the terrible, terrible truth that would come with it. Vanessa's hands trembled, a small, very human thing she had lied to protect. She had lied to shield. Now Jacob's words cracked the shell she had built, and the shell threatened to spill everything sharp and small on the church's polished floor. People shuffled. The wind picked at the fringe of Donnell's collar. Somewhere, a camera clicked as if the world had decided this would be the picture it wanted to remember. The son who had pieced his father's life into evidence, the mother whose edition of events seemed to bend away from the light, and the man who watched, with hands like traffic signals, ready to decide which lanes would remain open. Donnell stared at Vanessa, at the arc of her shoulders, at the set of her mouth. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. It was not just a question. It was a plea mortared in anger. Vanessa's answer lodged somewhere between the church doors and the press tents. She opened her mouth, lips quivering like a confession prepared and then swallowed back. Jacob's eyes were on her ledger now, on the way the paper bent and the lines of ink seemed heavier than the words themselves. Around them, people who had once called the McBrides neighbors and friends stood at a hair's breadth, waiting for the pronouncement that would rearrange them all. Donnell stood in the pale wash of morning light, the echo of Jacob's words still burning through his skull. The world had lost its shape since the funeral, tilting and bending like a reflection caught in warped glass. He had thought grief was the worst kind of pain, but this eye's betrayal was colder. It numbed him. It made every breath taste like rust. He looked down at the ledger spread open on the table, its pages stiff from years of quiet handling. Numbers, initials, coded references and Joey's name recurring like a ghost that refused to stay buried. The longer he stared, the more it read like a confession written in plain sight. His father's death, his mother's silence, Joey's involvement, all roads pointed back to a deal that had gone wrong. And somewhere, buried in those lines of ink, was the reason Doug McBride had died on that dark stretch of highway with his brakes cut and his secrets unspoken. Vanessa hadn't come downstairs yet. Donnell could hear her pacing above him, the sound of soft footsteps crossing and retracing the same path like she was walking circles around her guilt. He wanted to confront her again, to demand the whole story this time, not the polished half-truths she had been feeding him since February. But when he thought of her face at the funeral, hollowed by shame and fatigue, something inside him hesitated. She was his mother, and yet she was also a stranger now, someone who had been living in the shadows of a deal with the devil. The question was, had she done it to save them, or to save herself? The front door creaked. Donnell turned. Jacob stood in the threshold, the early light cutting sharp edges across his profile. He carried a thin file under his arm, official, clinical, like the beginning of a reckoning. "I thought you should see this," Jacob said, setting the file on the table. The lab confirmed it. The brake lines were cut with precision tools. It wasn't an accident. Donnell's throat tightened. "And you think Joey?" "I think Joey had motive, resources, and enough arrogance to believe he could clean it up," Jacob interrupted. His tone was careful, like a man weighing truth against politics. "But motive isn't evidence." "Not yet." "And your mother?" He paused. "She might know more than she's saying." Donnell's gaze hardened. "She's been lying for months." "Maybe longer." "Maybe she's afraid," Jacob said quietly. "Sometimes fear makes people choose the wrong kind of silence." That sentence hung heavy in the air. Vanessa descended the stairs just then, wrapped in a robe, her hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot. She froze when she saw Jacob and the open file on the table. "You had no right," she said softly, her voice trembling but laced with anger. "This isn't your jurisdiction anymore, Jacob." He looked at her evenly. "It's everyone's jurisdiction when a man's been murdered, Vanessa." She flinched at the word "murdered." It landed like a slap. Donnell stepped forward, unable to keep still. "Tell me the truth. No more stories, no more 'I was protecting you.' Did Joey kill Dad?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Then finally, she whispered, I don't know. You don't know? Donnell's voice cracked. You were working with him. You were taking his money. I didn't take his money, Vanessa shot back, the sudden fire in her eyes startling him. Doug did. And when Doug died, Joey made sure those debts didn't disappear with him. He came to me with threats to ruin our business, to leak things that would destroy the McBride name. I did what I had to do to keep us standing. So you partnered with the man who might have killed your husband? Her silence was the only answer. Jacob's jaw tightened. If Joey's pressuring you, you need to come forward. We can protect you. Vanessa laughed bitterly. Protect me? Do you have any idea who he owns? The casino, the real estate firm, the police union fund? You think an arrest warrant will mean anything when half the city owes him favors? Her voice broke at the end, the weight of exhaustion dragging her down. She sat heavily, pressing her palms against her temples. Doug was trying to pull out of a deal with him. That night, he went to confront Joey. He said he'd expose him if he didn't stop laundering money through the company. And then the next morning, Doug was dead. I got a call from Joey before the police did. He told me, "This is what happens when people can't keep quiet." Donnell felt his stomach twist. You never told anyone that? Vanessa looked up, eyes glistening. Would you have believed me? Or would you have run to him, like your father did, thinking you could fight him and win? Jacob exhaled slowly, his mind already processing the confession. If Joey said that, it's as close to an admission as we're going to get. We just need proof he ordered the sabotage. Donnell turned away, pacing the room. He won't make it easy. He's already feeding people lies. Told me Dad was reckless, that he was trying to save him. He's playing me and Mom against each other. Vanessa's expression hardened. That's what he does. He uses trust like currency. Outside, a car engine idled. All three froze. Jacob reached for the blinds and lifted a sliver. Parked across the street was a black SUV, tinted windows, engine running, motionless but watching. Friends of Joey's? Donnell asked. More like employees, Jacob muttered. He's letting you know you're being watched. Vanessa's hands shook. He won't stop until he has what he wants. What does he want? Donnell asked. The ledger, she said softly. The one I showed you isn't complete. There's another, the real one. Doug made a copy before he died. He hid it. Donnell stared at her. Where? Her gaze flickered toward the fireplace. Behind the panel. It's been there since the week before the accident. Doug said if anything happened to him, I'd know what to do. Jacob moved first, prying loose the wooden backing with a pocket knife. Inside was a weathered envelope sealed in wax. He opened it carefully, revealing pages of neat handwriting, transaction dates, names of offshore accounts, and most importantly, initials that linked Joey to a shell company under Doug's name. This is it, Jacob breathed. This ties Joey to the laundering. Donnell took one of the sheets. At the bottom was a note in Doug's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't make him stop. Don't trust Vanessa. Don't trust Joey. Burn everything before they burn you. The words hit Donnell like a punch. His father had known about the danger, about the deception, and had still walked into it, hoping maybe his death would mean something. Before anyone could speak, the sound of glass shattering filled the room. The window beside the door burst inward. A rock clattered across the floor, a note tied to it with string. Jacob rushed forward, tearing it open. 3 words, written in red ink: stop digging, Donnell. Vanessa gasped. Donnell's blood ran cold. Jacob grabbed his phone. I'll call for protection. We'll get a warrant. Search Joey's properties. No, Donnell interrupted. That's what he wants. He wants us to make noise. The second this gets out, he'll erase every trace. We need to hit him where he doesn't expect it. Jacob eyed him carefully. And where's that? In his own house, Donnell said. He's got a server in his office. Doug mentioned it once. Said Joey kept backups of every transfer. If we get that, we don't just prove the laundering, we prove murder. Vanessa shook her head in panic. You can't. He'll kill you. Donnell met her gaze, eyes cold but determined. He already tried. That night, the city hummed beneath a storm. Donnell drove through rain-soaked streets with Jacob beside him, the ledger wrapped in plastic on the back seat. The casino loomed in the distance like a glittering beast, lights pulsing in the fog. Inside, Joey sat in his office with a drink in hand, staring at a framed photo of himself and Doug at a charity gala years ago, a public mask for a partnership built on lies. When his phone buzzed, He smiled without humor. "He's coming," said the voice on the line. "Like you said he would." Joey leaned back, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Good. Let's welcome him properly." Meanwhile, Vanessa waited at home, every thunderclap making her flinch. She had lit every lamp in the house, as if light could keep the darkness from breaking in. Her phone vibrated once. An unknown number. A text. "You should have stayed quiet, Vanessa." Her breath caught. She looked out the window. The SUV was gone. Back at the casino, Donnell and Jacob slipped through the back corridor, moving past storage rooms toward the private office upstairs. The sound of machines and distant music echoed around them. The plan was simple: get in, copy the files, get out before Joey realized what they were after. But simplicity rarely survives contact with the truth. When they reached the office door, it was already open. Joey stood behind the desk, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You really think you're your father's son?" he said. "Charging in here like you've got the moral high ground." Doug did the same thing. He thought evidence mattered more than leverage. Donnell clenched his fists. "You killed him." Joey tilted his head. "I told him to back off." "He didn't." "So, he backed himself off the road, didn't he?" Jacob stepped forward, hand near his weapon. "That's enough, Armstrong." But Joey's guards moved in from both sides. Guns gleamed in the dim light. "You really think I'd let you come here without knowing? You've got one move left, detective." "Walk away." Donnell looked at Joey, then at the photo of his father still hanging behind the desk. Doug believed people could change. That's why he came here. That's why he died. Joey laughed quietly. "Doug was weak." "You're smarter. That's why I offered you a way in. You could have been part of this. Now you're just another liability." Donnell's voice was steady when he said, "You forgot one thing, Joey. Dad always made backups too." He pulled a small flash drive from his pocket and tossed it onto the desk. Joey frowned. "What's that?" "The copy of your offshore files. The ones you backed up to the external server. The one your accountant left unlocked last month." For the first time, Joey's mask cracked. "You're bluffing." Jacob smirked. "Try us." Outside, police sirens wailed. Joey's eyes flicked toward the window. The guards froze, uncertain. Donnell's phone was already recording, capturing every word that had just been said. Jacob leaned forward, voice low and certain. "You just confessed to obstruction and intimidation on tape." "Step away from the desk." The moment hung like lightning before it hits quiet, unbearable. Joey's smile returned, brittle but defiant. "You think this ends me?" "There'll always be another Joey, another deal, another Vanessa willing to play." Donnell's eyes darkened. "Maybe, but not you." The door burst open. Officers stormed in. Joey didn't resist. He just raised his glass and said, almost softly, "Tell your mother I said goodbye." As they led him away, Donnell exhaled for the first time in days. The ledger, the recordings, the confession, everything they needed was finally in hand. But outside, under the rain, he couldn't shake one thought: Joey was right. The system he built didn't vanish with handcuffs. It lived in whispers, in debts, in the people who had decided silence was safer than truth. When Donnell returned home, Vanessa was waiting on the porch, drenched from the rain, eyes red but burning with something new, not guilt, but resolve. "He's gone?" she asked. "For now," Donnell said. "But he's not the only one." Vanessa nodded. "Then we start over. But this time, no more lies." Donnell looked at her, at the woman who had built her life on secrets and broken faith, and wondered if starting over was possible when the foundation itself had been poisoned. The storm passed, but the air still felt heavy, the kind of quiet that waits for something to break again. And somewhere in the distance, behind steel bars and flashing cameras, Joey Armstrong smiled to himself. Because monsters like him didn't fear endings. They feared being forgotten, and Joey, even from a cell, would make sure he never was.